Happy June, everyone. This is Wendy from Shiny Happy World, and this little frog is the June pattern for the Funny Faces quilt block of the month. I'm really happy with how he turned out, and now I'm going to show you how to make him. And you can make him both with and without the optional tongue and fly bits. Here's how we do it. You're going to start out by printing or tracing your pattern on fusible adhesive. This is the Heat and Bond Light, which is my favorite to use, and I like to print it because I'm lazy. The first page is going to be all of the parts that you need for the frog. The tongue and the fly are a separate page. They wouldn't fit on this one anyway, so I did them on a separate page because I know some people won't want to use them. And the second page of the pattern that has the tongue and the fly actually has two tongues that are mirror image and two flies that are also mirror image. So if you wanted to, you could have some tongues and flies that don't look identical throughout your quilt. So you're going to start out by printing or tracing the pattern, and then you're going to roughly cut out all of the pieces. And just as a reminder, roughly cutting out means that you want to cut not right on the lines. Remember, always cut it out roughly first, leave a little extra room, because you want to do the final cut after you fuse it so that the adhesive goes right up to the very last thread of your fabric. So you're going to roughly cut out the pieces first, then fuse them to the back of your fabric. Here's the right side, so I'm fusing it to the wrong side, and then you're going to do a clean cut. And that means you're going to cut right on any solid lines, and any dashed lines you're going to leave a little extra past them, because that is going to be the bit that tucks under other pieces. So I'm just going to cut this one here. So I'm cutting directly on the solid line, and then I'm going to leave a little extra past the dashed line so that that can tuck under the head. So that is one eyeball. So here's an inventory of all the pieces you're going to need. You're going to have two eye bumps. You're going to have two big eyeballs. And I did mine because I wanted to minimize the fabric showing through. I backed my eyeballs first with a little bit of fusible interfacing, and I've got a separate video that I'll link to that shows you how to do that. But it basically just adds an extra sheer little layer, and it makes it a little harder to see through the whites of the eyes. So there will be a link in the post or in the description of this video to tell you a little bit more about those eye bumps, or about the interfacing. So two big googly eyes, and we've got two pupils for his eyes. You'll have one frog head piece, one piece for the frog shoulders, and one piece for the frog jaw. And if you are trying to make sort of realistic looking frog and you want to use two colors, usually the underside of a frog's mouth is a little bit lighter. The bottom side of his jaw is lighter colored than the top of his head. That's so when he's swimming in the water, animals looking up from below, the lighter color of his belly and the underside of his mouth blends in with the sunlight coming in through the water, and creatures looking down from the top are seeing that dark color on the back of his body, and it helps him blend in both directions. The other optional pieces are a frog tongue and the fly, which has got two wings and a little fly body. So we're going to assemble all of those here. Get these out of the way. I've got a quilt block that's already quilted here, and let me just take a second to adjust the camera so that you can see the entire block. Okay, there we go. Now you can see the entire quilt block in here. Just as a reminder, I use a method of quilt as you go where I quilt the background block to the batting, but I don't put the backing on until after I've made all the blocks and sewn them together. The backing goes on in the last step, and I've got a free workshop that shows you how I do my entire quilt as you go method. And if you have any questions, because I know that that's a little counter to most of the quilt methods that you've seen, You can watch that whole thing and it'll show you how I put all of my quilts together from start to finish. So I have an already quilted block here, and now I'm just going to start layering the body on. So I like to start with whatever aligns with the bottom cut edge of the block. And I'm peeling off my backing. And this is the frog's shoulders, and I'm going to tuck him kind of over to the side because I want to have room for that tongue and the fly to get in there. But you could center him in there. You can do it without the tongue and the fly. I just want to show you all the things. So next up, I'm going to put his jaw into place. And I just layer that so that it just overlaps the top of his shoulders. If you remember, the shoulders piece had a dotted line at the top where the chin, his jaw overlaps it, and it also had a dotted line at the bottom where this is going to be the seam allowance. So I've lined up the bottom edge with the bottom edge of the block. So the bottom edge of his shoulders is actually going to get sewn into the quilt when all of the blocks get sewn together. So the jaw doesn't have anything that overlaps it, so it just sits there. And then we have the top of his head, which has a dotted line. It goes underneath the jaw. So I like my frogs to have a little bit of an overbite. So this is going to tuck in behind that jaw just a little bit. There we go. Now I'm going to put some eye bumps in place, and again they have that dotted line at the bottom, so they are going to tuck behind the tops of the head. So here is one, and I decided to do a lighter blue for the bumps just to get a little contrast between them, but you could make it match the top of the head, or if you have a third color, a medium blue would be really good to do in there. So you've got dark and light and dark back for his shoulders, and then I'll get a little medium for the eyeballs. Now I'm going to put the googly white eyes, and these pieces are going to just sit right over those eye bumps. And you can see just a little bit of that line showing through. That doesn't bother me at all. I kind of like seeing the construction of the pieces underneath. But if that bothers you, just use a nice weight cotton, like a Kona weight, with that interfacing in there, wouldn't show through at all. This is just, it's what I had on hand. It's a really, really cheap, thin muslin. I ran out of my white Kona. So there's his googly eyes, and I'm going to just set the pupils here. I'm going to put them permanently in place once I decide where the fly is going to go, because I want to make those pupils look at the fly. But you could make him look straight at you if you were doing one without a fly in the picture, for example. Now the tongue has a little bit of a dotted line at the bottom. I made the tongue really, really long. That's to give you as many options as possible. That first piece that I showed you wasn't on a square block, it was on a rectangle block, because I'm going to let that be the calendar desktop wallpaper for June, and it would also make a great like a placemat or a pillowcase to have that rectangle format, and then you can fit a really long tongue. But if you're trying to make a quilt block, you might need to do a much shorter tongue, in which case we can cut it. You could even overlap this over the eye if we wanted to. Or you know what, let's switch him to the other side of the block. That way he'll be very different from my other one. So I'm just going to move all these guys over. Tuck the top of the head under. Make sure I've got the right amount of overlap. That looks good. Eye bumps, big googly whites, big googly whites. Now I know our fly is going to be somewhere over here. So let's say I make the fly be up there. I don't need to have all of this overlapping under there, so I'm going to snip that a little bit shorter. So feel free to shorten that tongue as much as you need to work within the space that you're working with. I just gave you as much as possible to work with. So tuck that in. Let's see, that's going to work really well there. And then for the fly, we've got the fly body. And I think I'm going to make him not quite being caught by the frog, but on the verge of being snapped up. So I'm going to take the wings and just tuck the wings behind the body, because at the base of the wings we had a little dotted line there, so that's just a reminder for you. There we go. So now we've got a fly, and now I want to make sure that these eyes are really looking at that fly. Yeah, I think that's good. So there we go. I'm going to take this and I'm going to fuse it down, and then I'll bring it back and show you a little bit, some tips for outlining it. Okay, here's the finished block with all of the stitching done on it, and you can see that really accents all of the pieces and makes them really clear and distinct. So again, just like the other ones, I've been doing going around all the pieces 3 times because I like that kind of sketchy, scribbly effect. I'm trying deliberately to not go directly over my line. I want to see sometimes all 3 of the lines. So on this one, just to kind of give you an overview of the order in which I stitched these, because there's a lot of pieces going on here. So when I've got the tongue and the fly in there, I'll show you an example of one in a minute without. When I've got the tongue and the fly in there, I start in the middle of this tongue piece here, but I'm going to go around the jaw. So I start in here and I went around the jaw once, and then I overlapped a little bit, and then I did the tongue. So I went once, twice, 3 times, and then I went back, and now I'm doing my second pass around the jaw. So that's 2, and then 3 times around, and then I tied it and started again. What I'm trying to do with this is minimize the number of times I have to cut and tie my thread. So then I did the shoulders, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. That was pretty easy. Then I did around the whites of the eyes. And what I did for these, I actually started over here first. I started just inside the head here, and I went around once, twice, 3 times, and then I kept going and overlapped just a little bit more, and then I went 1, 2, 3 and tied off. And then I did on this eye, and I did the same thing. I started just a little bit, actually just a little bit inside here, and I went 1, 2, 3, and then I overlapped it just a little bit and went 1, 2, 3. And then I backed up here. So that actually, there's 4 rows actually in here, and I went 1, 2, 3, tied it off. And then over here, all I have left is this bit here and this bit here. So I went, let's see, I did 1, 2, 3, yeah, so 1, 2, 3, and then I didn't tie off, I just backtracked a couple of stitches and went 1, 2, 3. Then the pupils, I just went around each pupil once. Since it's black on black, you can't really see the multiple stitching. And then the last thing to do is the fly. And I started I'm going around the body first, but I started in the middle of one wing, and I went all the way around once, overlapped it a little bit more, and went 1, 2, 3. Kept going around this way, went all the way to this side and went 1, 2, 3. And then continued around for the second pass around, and then one more time around and tied it off. And that is how I did all of the stitching with as little cutting and tying as possible. And now I just want to show you one more finished block. And this is one without any fly, just to kind of see what that can look like too. This is for the pink on pink on pink quilt that I've been working with. So it's The background is a little bit busier than what you're used to seeing from me, but I think it's really cute and I think it looks really great with all of the other pink blocks that I've been working on so far. So I'll show that in the blog post that goes with that. I'll show you what all of the pink on pink on pink blocks are looking like together. And that's it. I hope you like the new Funny Faces Block of the Month Club block, and I can't wait to see all the frogs that you guys make. I'm Wendy from Shiny Happy World. I'll see you next time.